This video is the introduction to your semester project for PSY 222 Research Methods in the Psychological Sciences. What I'm going to do in this video is kind of walk you through the information that is also presented in the D2L module for the semester project on your D2L page, just so that I can give you an additional set of explanations and kind of the logic behind what we want for this semester project. I will say, just in broad introduction, when we set about designing the whole PSY 222 course, because it is a redesign for the program, we really wanted to backward design it so it would prepare you very, very well for when you get into PSY 400 senior research. I've taught senior research for many, many years, and there were a number of things that we felt we could do a better job of in terms of preparing students for their senior research experience. So that's one of the purposes of this semester project, is to get you some real hands-on experience in a relatively low stakes environment. Now, as is described for you on the D2L semester project module, the purpose of this assignment is to give you some practice working on most of the steps, not all of the steps, but most of the steps for completing a research project from start to finish. The palette text gives you access to a number of data sets that are referred to throughout the text that you will be using for your homework in addition to for the semester project. In the back part of that book, from pages 337 to 41, the data files are described for you, and I have uploaded the actual data files and other files that go with them, like surveys and code books, to your D2L module. So you're going to want to make sure that you use that module as your resources for this entire project. The project itself is broken up into step-by-step worksheets. Again, all of those are linked to the D2L module for the semester project. So again, the semester project module is going to be your home base for your weekly work on this project. You know, starting next week, week 4, you'll be doing a project each week, or a part of the project each week in the form of a worksheet, to get you moving on, with the end result being a formally written up research report. The learning goals, you know, as I mentioned before, one of our intentions with designing PSY 222 as we have, since this is a requirement for all of our majors, we want you to have these skills in place by the time you reach us in your senior research courses. Because it will better prepare you, it will enable you to hit the ground running in that class, feeling pretty confident that you know what to do in terms of designing and then conducting data collection and all of the other steps that are involved in the research process. Now, speaking of all those steps, the one step that you're not going to be taking as you work on your semester project is the actual designing of methods, selecting tools for collecting data, and then actually collecting data. You will be, you know, selecting variables, articulating questions, developing hypotheses. You will be analyzing data, describing your sample, describing results, and then writing a research report. The part of the process that we don't have the time in a one semester course, nor do I think it's necessary at this point in your learning to add that kind of stress. We don't have the time for all of us to set out to actually collect data, especially in a compressed semester and when you're learning online. So we're going to take advantage of the fact that we have available data sets that have already been prepared for you. You will have been using them for homework, especially the survey.save data set you'll be using that extensively in your homework. So it's a data set that you're going to get really, really familiar with. And I think that adds some comfort to your work on the semester project as well. So the steps in the process, and these are outlined for you with hyperlinks to all of the components in the D2L module for the semester project. You know, your first step, you want to review the pages in Palette that have there's a brief description of the research that she and her colleagues conducted in order to generate the survey.save data file that you have access to for the semester project. Step 2, you need to actually download the data set, the survey, and the code book. So there are 3 things that have been posted for you as files on D2L, and you will need them throughout as you work on your project. Do remember, you need to have access to SPSS to actually open the survey.save dataset. I've provided you with instructions for how to access SPSS. If you have not requested access to the VPN in order to do that, you need to do that right away. If you are on campus, you can use Campus Labs in order to access SPSS. But if you're wanting to do it from your laptop via Wi-Fi, you have to be on the VPN in order to do that through the virtual desktop. The first actual deadline for the semester project is on the 26th of September, and that's the semester project variables and references worksheet. And I'm going to go over that more at the end of this video presentation. The next step is to summarize the articles you find in the first assignment, and that's due on October the 3rd. After that, you're going to be, based on your reading and summary of your articles and the choice of variables that you've made, you need to fashion some questions and then formulate hypotheses based on those questions. That's due the 10th. Then you're going to build, this will be your first real piece of writing. It won't be particularly long. You're working with a very small number of articles that you've already summarized in the worksheet previous and putting it into an APA style introduction section. The next step is building a method section, and this will be very limited. You know, you haven't designed the methods for this study. Pallant and her colleagues did when they did the original piece of research. And I will pause here and say, I need to track down the original article for you. I had intended on doing that last week and it just slipped my mind, so I will make sure I do that for you, so just so that you can see it. But anyway, you're not, these aren't your methods. You will be going on and relying on the description that Pallant provides you of how the data was collected and in what way. That section in Pallant in the back of the book where she provides you with the code book, with the surveys, and with the variables, that's the information you'll be using to work on the project method section worksheet. The next part is where you'll go in and you'll actually do the statistics that are required for describing your sample and testing your hypotheses. And this is where you'll want to, you know, if you know exactly what to do, by all means, go right ahead. If you get stuck during this part, I will remind you right around that time that you should take advantage of the office hours in the virtual classroom or set up an individual time to have a video chat with me so that I can coach you if you need to be coached through that process. The next step that's due November 7th is writing a summary, what we call an APA style, a discussion section. Then, and even though it appears first in an APA research report after the title page, you should always write your abstract last. So the abstract worksheet is due on the 14th, and then the first draft rather of your full research report and I've provided you with a template for how to do the formatting, is due on the 18th. That's as our usual deadlines tend to be, at the end of the week. I need it a little earlier than that so I can get you feedback in time for you to complete a final draft of your research report on the 24th. Now, this is the description I was referring to of the study itself. And again, I'm going to track down the actual citation for you so that you know a little bit more about the study. But basically what this research was designed to do was to look at a variety of factors and how they're related to outcome variables related to adjustment and well-being. Like life satisfaction, positive affect or mood, and so on. So there were a variety of scales that were used, and they looked at a lot of research in that area to try and look at all of the interreactions. The scales, as she describes here, measure things like self-esteem, mastery, sense of personal control, stress, mood, and life satisfaction. And they also included measures that look at social desirability, although we are not going to be considering those in your work on your semester project. Many times researchers include a social desirability measure to see if people are faking their responses. Regardless, it's not something that's going to be a focus of our work. This last part here, she gives you a little bit of information on how many people were in the sample, the breakdown of males and females, the age range. And again, this paragraph, I've just screenshotted it and taken it from your textbook. You should also pay attention to the fact that each of the scales, your author has given you the reference for each of the scales, the name of the scale, how many items were on it. So when you put together your final research report and you describe using the scale that was used to assess your particular variables, you will include the description of the scale, but also the reference will need to go on your reference page as well. So she gives you all of those, and here's the remainder of the list of the scales used to assess the variables. Notice when you look at these are all scales that have been published. Their use in various respects have been published in journals or in other types of publications, such as books. And they are seen as valid and reliable measures of the constructs that are typically indicated in their titles. So for example, I've had lots of students over the years use the perceived stress scale as just a general measure of how much stress you're under at the moment. And it's a 10-item scale, it's quick, it's easy to score, and Pallant has used it in this piece of research as well. Similarly, the self-esteem scale by Rosenberg, very commonly used. You can see it's quite old. It was published in 1965. It has stood the test of time and continues to be used. Same with the social desirability scale, published in 1960. Pallant also provides you, in this image, again, I've screenshotted this and taken it out of your text. I just want your eye to be directed towards it. This is how each of the scale scores for each of these questionnaires was constructed. So what she gives you here is the responses that subjects give on these questionnaires can range on the mastery scale from 6 to 30. She also indicates which of the items, based on how they're worded, have to be reverse scored. And you'll learn more about that when you do your reading in Pallant. So that may sound like Greek to you at the moment, but it won't be after you've done your reading. So just for future reference, she provides this information about exactly how each of these measures is responded to by participants, what the high and low range is, which items, if any, need to be reverse scored, and that's information that you include in your methods section. Now you'll only be including the variables that you've chosen to write about in your semester project. So that's my summary of the semester project for you. Now what I'm going to do next, I just want to take you back to the module and make sure that you remember. Go to the semester project module for all of the information that I've just covered, including all of the deadlines, the location of the drop boxes, the copy of the worksheets. Now these worksheets are presented to you in Word form. And what you should do with them, it became far too cumbersome to have you do these worksheets in the quiz area of D2L, as I have done with homework. These worksheets were just a little too complicated for that, and it would have been more work than it was worth. So you'll need to download the worksheets, open them in Word, and put your responses to the elements of the worksheet in the document, save it, and then upload it to the Dropbox that's indicated for each of those worksheets. Also indicated, and I didn't cover this in the PowerPoint, you have access to APA resources. We're all getting comfortable with a new edition of the APA manual, and luckily the APA manual has a whole set of handouts, basically, that give you all of the information that you're going to need in order to properly build your research report. In addition to just some reminders, things you should have learned in PSY 120 about plagiarism and how to prevent that. So these handouts that I've given you, they provide an example of a sample paper. And I would like you to look at it carefully because it gives you all of this very helpful formatting information. Things like what has to be centered, what has to be in bold, what isn't in bold, how do I build this running head at the top of the page, where do the page numbers belong. And in APA style, these elements are their rules. They're cultural rules within the APA psychology research universe that you are expected to follow. For example, the word abstract here is centered. It's in bold. There's no indent on this paragraph for the abstract. The word keyword is italicized, but it's indented. It's all these really mysterious little things. They're annoying for us as writers, but they're a part of the culture and they're rules you're expected to follow when you write papers. So I would encourage you to look carefully at that document that's available to you. Another that I created for you, this is in Word, it's a template where I have created the formatting for you of certain things, like the margins, the positioning of the running head, the positioning of the page numbers, and so on, and some reminders about what headings need to be italicized, what headings need to be in bold, what headings need to be indented, and so on. So that document is one that you will need to download, and what I would encourage you to do is download it, save it, and use it to create your research report in, and then save a new copy so that you're using the same formatting. Other things on this list of resources from the APA, you have guidelines on headings, guidelines on numbers and statistics. There are several examples of how to do references properly, and I am notorious for being a stickler about how you format your references and how you format your citations. So be aware of that. They give you another sample of a professional paper that you can look at. This one happens to be in Word, so it's just another example that you can look at to help yourself learn how to do this. So make sure that you avail yourself of those options that are available to you. I'll conclude by walking through the first worksheet that you're going to be working on next week, for the semester project. And it'll seem super confusing until you do what you're supposed to do, which is review pages 337 to 341 in Palette, describing the research project and what's in the data set. So your first step, these are the variables that were involved in this study, and you can see there are a lot of them. Your semester project is not going to involve all of them. Your semester project, you get to pick one of these that you want to focus on, and that will become your core variable. It'll be your core dependent variable because it's the variable you want to explain. So whichever one of these you want to have as your focus, and it's completely up to you which you choose, that becomes your core variable. So you'll write it in here. Then, and I really struggled, should I put this as step 3 or should it be step 4? I'm really thinking as I sit here right now, it should have been step 4. So I want to come back to this in a second, the finding references. You may want to actually go ahead and select your additional variables before you do the lit search exercise. So after you have your core dependent variable that you want to try and understand and explain, then you need to select your additional variables. The first one needs to be quantitative. So as you by the point in time when you're watching this, in your reading, you've learned what a quantitative variable is. It's measured in numbers, not words. And all of the variables in this study that are measured using scales that produce total scores are possibles. So just make sure you don't choose your core variable again. So let's say I chose optimism as my core outcome variable. I could then choose life satisfaction as my second. Then you need, as my first quantitative variable, then you need one more. Again, don't pick either your core variable or your variable 1. Pick a different one. Maybe since I've already chosen optimism and life satisfaction, maybe I'll choose total self-esteem as my second quantitative variable. Then you need to choose one categorical variable. So something measured by what category you're in. So you could also say measured in words. And this is the list of possible categorical variables for you to choose from. Variable 1, 2, and 3 here. So you have your core variable and then you have 3 additional variables. Those are required. If you want to throw more things in the soup, you're allowed. You do not have to. So the bonus variables are optional for you. You can choose another categorical variable. You could choose another quantitative variable if you want to. But those, again, the bonus variables are optional for you. Now, if we go back up to the references, and I'm going to go over a refresher for you for how to do this in PsycInfo. What I want you to do is, after you've selected your core variable and your 3 additional variables, you need to go find some articles that involve those variables so that you will be able to get practice and experience summarizing those articles, building a literature review based on those articles, and then generating some hypotheses that are connected to them. So to give you a refresher, and again, this is something that we that should have been included in your PSY 120 experience, but here's a refresher for you, and I have posted this on D2L for you in the module for the semester project. Basically, when you want to do a lit search, you go to the UMU library page, you select subject search, you select psychology. Now, if you were doing a different kind of research, that say you were in neuroscience and you were studying heart rate variability, you may want to start with bio and hit the medical databases instead. But for this study, you're going to want to choose psychology and you're going to want to choose PsycInfo as your database. Then you'll be moving to, and if you're off campus, again, you should be able to access the databases. This is how I do it. I don't use the VPN. I use my Purple Plus card ID to access the databases off campus. You can also do it by the VPN, but I just haven't had to. So first, you can enter your core variable, and when you do that, what you'll see is you'll get, upwards of 10,000 hits. So you're going to have to narrow your search, and the way you do that, you can narrow it by choosing what you're required to have as articles. And what you're required to have first is they have to be empirical studies. When you get into SCE, we're going to require that you use mostly empirical studies. I'm having you avoid for the semester project lit reviews because they tend to be dense and theoretical. I would rather you get the experience summarizing empirical studies. Then I want you to further narrow, like run a search including your additional variables. So you've got your core variable and then 3 more. You've got 2 quantitative variables and 1 qualitative one. Run a search combining your, let's say my core variable is optimism, then I'm going to put my second quant variable that I'm interested in the next search box and hit search. Again, I can narrow it to empirical studies only, and that will get you closer and closer to the articles that will actually be helpful for you in your paper. Here's an example. If my qualitative variable that I've checked, that I've selected is marital status, I'll run a search on optimism and marital status, for example, and then select your articles. So that's a refresher, and again, I posted this document for you on D2L so that you have it. So that concludes my coverage here of the semester project. Obviously, if you have questions or concerns, if you're confused by anything, or if you just want to talk to me one-on-one, please come to office hours or set up an appointment where we can have a video chat to talk through it. The last thing I want is for this to be some overwhelmingly stressful kind of experience for you. So I've designed it with lots of steps, very incremental, and you have the opportunity with your final project to revise.